Nice in this church to walk up these little steps. I heard the rabbis teaching once about Jesus and how when Jesus went to teach the people, he always taught from a little hill. And they said he did not teach from a great big mountain to make himself high and mighty, neither did he put himself down in a deep valley so that he could be obscure and unnoticed. He found a little place of elevation so that people could see him and hear him clearly. And I'm guessing that's why we built churches with pulpits. Barbara and I have been away for this past week in British Columbia. Barbara had a piece of work to do, a very important piece of work. Her sister, Brenda, had died just a couple of weeks ago now, and Barbara was the appointed executor. So in BC, I was the chauffeur. Jesus said, "I am among you as one who serves." Barbara did all the heavy lifting. I did all the driving. But Barbara's job was to settle this estate with Brenda's family. And this was a challenging job. Any of you who have ever been an executor of an estate know that it's a big responsibility. But Barbara invested herself in the job to the best of her ability. I'd like to sum that little bit of our experience up by saying it was a hard week. It was a demanding week. It required a lot of both of us. And it was also in BC a very overcast, dark, broody, cloudy week. It was not the best time to be a human being for us. It was weighty. It was heavy. And on the day that we were to go home, we got up early, as we generally do when we start thinking about our own pillows. We got up early, and we had some time on our hands, and we took the TV on, and we found a movie from the 1930s. And it was an interesting movie because it was kind of cheesy in terms of how it was acted out. It had very dramatic music. It was very exaggerated. But at the very heart of this movie was a wonderful little life lesson. You see, it was about a doctor. And as a young man, this doctor obviously had talent, and his mom and dad invested their available resources, and they had few resources, but they gave what they had so their young son could have an education. And by that education, he became a doctor. And when he became a doctor, he had a vision. And the vision was based on the Hippocratic Oath, which I can't recite for you, but it's very similar to the vision that Jesus had when he began his life's work. It was about caring for the needy. It was about caring for the lame. It was about caring for the afflicted. It was about giving comfort to those who were distressed. This was the doctor's vision. And he practiced medicine in a ghetto of New York. I'm not sure what the district was called, but in the movie they called it the ghetto. So you can imagine it was the place in New York City where the poorest of the poor lived. And every day the poor would line up at the doctor's office. There was a long staircase, and he would greet them one by one. And he would greet them with a warm face, with an open posture. And they began to love this doctor. And for any case at all, he demanded only a nickel or maybe a dime. But he had a brother, a younger brother. And the younger brother thought that the doctor was wasting his life caring for all these poor people and getting no reward other than the gratitude and the appreciation of those folks. And the brother went and talked to the mom and said, "Mom, you gotta talk to my big brother. You gotta tell him that he's so talented and we're so poor. He should invest himself in becoming a real doctor for real people." And Mom was reluctant, but she did persuade her son, and he made a change. And he moved away from the ghetto, and he moved uptown. And he began to practice medicine for folks who had money. And he began to make money, and the family was enriched. And he became famous. He became one of the most extraordinary doctors that people knew about. But the doctor, as he went forward, getting richer and richer, giving more and more material blessings to his family and his friends, began to be very unhappy in his heart. He had a friend who worked in a school for the deaf and the blind. She was lame on one side, but she loved these children. And she had loved the doctor, although she had never spoken it out loud, when he was with those kids, helping them be healthy and happy. She worked and persuaded him to come back, but he couldn't do it until the day his father died. His father had had an episode with his heart, and the doctor was going to operate because he was the best doctor of all. But his dad died on the operating table, and it broke his heart. He could not go on. He could not continue to practice medicine among the affluent and the wealthy. And then, just by chance, the young woman that he had worked with, who loved him, got in touch with him and called him back. And in coming back to the ghetto, coming back to the poorest of the poor, he again began to practice medicine. He again began to give generously to those who could afford nearly nothing. His life was saved. His soul was restored. I'd like to suggest that the story indicates two realities. The reality of loving care, loving service in the context of a community, in the context of a neighborhood. It's a person caring for other persons. And then the story shifts, and now the interest is in material wealth, material things, bigger stuff, shinier stuff, more stuff. And the story makes it quite clear, at least it did to Barbara and I, that what really matters is the practice of loving care. Now, the parable of the talents is a parable about investing. And it's a parable told in terms of money. And do you remember one day they asked Jesus about Caesar, what they should do? And he got a coin out of a fish's mouth, and he showed them a coin and said, "Whose picture's on this coin?" And they said, "Caesar's." He said, "Well, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God." The world of money and the world of care. Now, in the parable, those who use money well succeed. Those who use money very well succeed superlatively. I don't even know what the word was. In a very big way. And the one who did not invest his money well was basically despised and cast out from the goodness of the master's house. And when I read that parable, that little bit made me think of all the poor people in our social economy who are despised because they have not been successful in the marketplace. And I realized that the story had to be clarified. Even though Jesus used the example of money, he was talking about something else. And he wanted us to be very careful not to confuse the world of money with the something else that he had in mind. Jesus knew that inside each and every one of the people who heard him, just as inside of each and every one of us, there's a gift of love, a gift of compassion, a gift of generosity. And Jesus wanted people to invest this gift, to take the love, the compassion, and the generosity, and to share it with family, to share it with neighborhoods, to share it with communities, to share it with strangers, and even, in a very hard-to-swallow way, to share it with our enemies. Jesus is calling us to invest our lives in our contexts so that we will receive back a blessing more magnificent than the gift we have given. In other words, love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. And in our society, so much of the message that we get is, look after yourself. Take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Jesus turns that upside down. Take what's in it, in you, and make use of it to bring benefit to those around you. I'm looking at a small group of people. I'm thinking of the neighborhood that you have a vision for. And I'm going to consider you as a small package of yeast. And you know how yeast works in bread. You're the yeast. The neighborhood is the bread. Invest yourselves. Be kind to those you meet along the way. Smile. Be generous. Be helpful. Be gracious. Be the person God made you to be. We now have we who follow Jesus Christ, have a tremendous investment opportunity. Let's give our lives as he gave his lives, not to despise the poor who are not successful in the marketplace, but to comfort them, to gather them in to the security and the confidence of God's love. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Amen.